This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 218, recorded on June 11th, 2015. Here at Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in a blustery, rainy, I'm about ready to build an ark. We've had so much rain this summer already, Mike. It's kind of been a rainy...
No kidding. Well, then right? Monday through Tuesday confused us because we're really hot, really sunny, and then we come right back to that rainy hurricane.
Back to a lot of rain. So I think the drought is over here in Nebraska. And, of course, we post the show with world-class show notes each week out at the AverageGuy.tv. If you have questions, comments, or contributions, of course, you can contact us. Send us an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv. That's a great way to do it. You can track me down on Twitter @jcollison. Many of you have. We're getting a really good Twitter conversation going on out there. You can call in your questions as well. And Neil calls me each week. Neil, thanks for your encouragement. He's really liked where we've been going lately. 402-478-8450, and we'll play those questions right here on the show. Of course, the AverageGuy.tv is powered by Maplegrove Partners Web Hosting. Get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people you know and trust. And one of them, the guy, is right here tonight. We're going to talk about Maplegrove Partners. Of course, that's Christian, and so if you want to, he's got some room on his servers, and if you want to take him up on his offer, the plan started as cheap as $10 a month. It's a great deal. Head over to maplegrovepartners.com. I want to thank Roger over at WLMN Radio at WLMNradio.com for streaming us daily, Monday through Friday, out at Grafton, West Virginia. So if you're listening from Grafton, we'd love to hear from you. Just drop us an email. And, of course, Home Gadget Geeks is a part of the Geeks Network. Find the links to this show and many other great podcasts out at thegeeksnetwork.com. You can join us in chat, watch or listen live, watch on YouTube, listen on Spreaker, find all the navigation over, and actually the new live pages out at The Average Guy. Christian, thanks for helping me get the new live pages up out at theaverageguy.tv. All right, we're going to dig in tonight. We've been talking about for a while, last couple of weeks, Kyle Wilcox had called in, 6 weeks ago and said, hey, love to get an overview of the architecture that Christian uses for Maplegrove Partners. So you're watching this, it's not going to be one gigantic commercial. Christian's really going to dig into a lot of the technology that he does behind it. But before we dig into that, I want to welcome Mike. Mike, welcome back.
Thanks. Good to be here. We're getting prepped up for my favorite week in Omaha, College World Series time. It's always a fun time, especially, working downtown. It's like a week-long party down there. So I love it. Hopefully the rain holds off then for the coming week. But
the College World Series is always the beginning of the hottest times in Omaha.
Very
true.
It
seems like it starts rainy and it ends hot. And we have 2 weeks ahead for us. And the city of Omaha, there's no better place to be than the city of Omaha during the College World Series, and it just rock and rolls. So.
Oh yeah, the city really adopts it. That's what I like. A lot of times if you're going to like the Stanley Cup Finals or something in a different city, you might not even notice it's happening. But in Omaha, College World Series is happening. It's awesome.
It's great. Great to be in Omaha. And if you're anywhere nearby, you ought to come up for a game. And if you're coming up to Omaha, of course, let us know. Mike and I will try and connect with you. If you're ever coming through Omaha, a lot of folks drive through Omaha. You got to get through Omaha to get to just about everywhere on the planet. Let us know. Mike and I usually maybe make our schedules work out. We can meet you. We'd love to do that as well.
Yeah, I'd love to see some people.
Yeah, it'd be fun. I think, Mike, now that I've got you, we really need to start working on an Omaha meetup. That's we do this one in Fishers, Indiana that we're going to go out and do. If you're still interested in joining us for the Average Guy. It's the Home Service Show, SurfaceGeeks.net, AverageGuy.tv meetup. That's a really long title. If you're interested in doing that in Fishers, Indiana, the link will be in the show notes. Just head out to the AverageGuy.tv for this show or a couple of past ones. We'll have the show notes. We'll have a link to it to how to get involved in all of that. We tried to get it this year, Christian, so you could attend. But we just couldn't pull August off. Sad. It was just too early, man. Sorry.
It is sad. I know. I'm grateful.
Maybe that's when we'll do the Omaha one and we can get you out here.
That'd be good. That'd be good.
Yeah. Coordinate it with the interns and we can figure something out. So it's, anyways, let's dive in. We promised we would talk a lot about the Maplegrove Partners infrastructure. Christian, why don't you take us back a little bit? Let's start, it didn't start as Maplegrove Partners for sure, right?
Not at all.
How'd you get going? Today it's web hosting. The AverageGuy.tv is hosted there. You've got a few other customers as well on that, room for more. But And so that's kind of where it's at today. What you're listening to this, you downloaded it from the Maple Grove Partner servers. You're watching this if you're on the live page, Maple Grove Partner servers. But take us back to the beginning.
It all started back in 2008 or 9, I think, actually, on IX Web Hosting, which was a shared hosting provider that, at the time, it really was hardly doing, compute architectures, yet alone web hosting of any kind at a serious production scale. And I'd probably started around 12 years old or so with playing around with IX Web Hosting for my music school, and really trying to figure out how to support the requirements of that. IX Web Hosting is a shared hosting environment. They do have a lot of customers, but they're they're one of many in terms of when we talk about where am I going to host and run a website. There's billions of options, and as my website started getting popular and traffic started picking up and I was hitting 3,000-4,000 users a day and so forth, I started noticing that, hey, performance on this really sucks. And whenever your site goes down, you're reliant on, if you're with a good provider, a 1-800 number, opening up a ticket, waiting for an engineer to go to look at it, and that can start to weigh on you. But in the shared hosting environment, big company like IX Web Hosting, you're really not going to run into that in terms of I opened up a ticket and I'm not getting any support back, and it's taken me days to get my stuff back online. That being said, the shared hosting environment is cheap because it doesn't support really high performance websites. You're sharing it with a lot of other people, and once your site starts to get any kind of success or momentum, you really start to outgrow the model very quick. And in the case of IX Web Hosting, they're very clever about going from your baseline shared web hosting to, oh, you're successful now, well, pay us a bunch of money for a dedicated or virtual private server. And those fees, entry level at IX started at IX Web Hosting started around $40 a month, which for me at the time I was like, no. So I started doing shopping, and I'd say about 3 years later from what we were doing with IX Web Hosting, I really started getting into what is the cheap budget virtual private server solution where I will be able to have control of installing the server, logging into it, setting up the software, making configuration changes. I won't have to open up a ticket every time I want Apache tweaked, that kind of flexibility. And VPS market is very similar. You can get a lot of high-end stuff, you can get a lot of low-end stuff. So I think I found something that I would say at the time I bought it, I felt was pretty mid-tier. Verpus, which is now actually called Wowza Technologies, they merged about a year back, is what we would call a budget virtualized hosting solution, meaning you can buy the VPS. It's really almost at the same price as a shared hosting. Maybe you're paying a little more, but not much, and it gives you all that freedom and control. Sadly, smaller company, not a dedicated support staff, so you'd have these network outages where it'd be like a day or two of just complete blackouts, and you couldn't do anything, and at that point I had started putting a lot of customers into this environment, and it was it started off pretty great. As it started to get larger and I was buying more VMs from them and expanding my infrastructure on their platform, I just found it was really unreliable and unsustainable to the point where it didn't get any traction for me, and I was going to start losing customers if I couldn't get them to do their job. So at that point I kind of said, you know what, we've been building networks in the basement of my house since I was 10 years old. I know better than anyone that this is a relatively doable thing, so screw it, I'll do it myself. And I really have not been I typically only host for either A, people I know, or B, for my own stuff, right? Because there's a lot of liability you assume when you open up a huge market of potential customers and have this huge hosting environment, right? Some of the stuff we'll go through tonight includes not just the architecture, but how do you secure a platform like this? How do you know where you're getting attacked, from what angles, what applications, how are you going to support your users, how are you going to do maintenance and patching. This is typically what we pay 100+ people in a company to sit and do. But so what we decided to do was bring it in-house with the stuff we had existingly, start phasing it off that virtual private server environment onto my physical hardware. And we ran in that configuration for about a year and a half, and it was interesting. Jim can probably attest better than anyone that it was definitely homebrew at the time, and homebrew was the word that we used a lot because it was sitting in my basement, but more importantly because it was basically, nothing was standardized in terms of here's the architecture, here's how I'd expect a customer to handle it, right? Because it's only with people I knew at the time. But it was really great that when there was a problem, I could be on site to, fix it and not have to worry about it and not have to wait for anyone. And then, we gave this a couple years of really kind of saying, hey, this is where this could be better. This is how we could make this faster, and we just started broadening and making a more general model to the point where I said, hey, I think it's, we've worked out a lot of the kinks, and it's pretty smooth, and we can kind of operate it without having a lot of people involved in it, and we have a lot of smart automation going on to keep the network secure and reliable. Let's go ahead and open this thing up. So in January 2015, Maplegrove Partners, the LLC that I'm the CEO of, started doing this hosting, and automated billing. We built all that infrastructure out, put together all the website and the materials. And we really built a solution that I think is incredibly competitive in the market for a couple key reasons. Number one, it's incredibly hard to find shared hosting that runs fast and is actually going to give you the performance of what a VPS would if you had to sit there and configure it all yourself. So I'm really proud of the fact that we can run a lot of web containers simultaneously in that type of shared environment, but give you the performance of something that is dedicated. And that took a long time to kind of get right and get fleshed out. Because I'm a cybersecurity guy, security and data privacy are one of the biggest concerns for me in doing all of this. And so a lot of thought in the architecture went into how to keep it secure, how to monitor threats, how to make sure users' data is secure and safe. 3, and this one is kind of special to this community, we wanted to target this web hosting platform to be the platform for podcasters. And so we try and make sure that our web environment is user-friendly to all of the tools, services, and optimization required to run a podcast network, stream audio and video, have the right bandwidth you need, and basically give you the tools that, if you wanted to run an audio video podcast shop on a shared hosting provider, you really wouldn't be able to do it that well. We kind of give you that same flexibility within that model and allow you, if you have existing podcast community, if you're starting up a new one, great sandbox to kind of dig in and get high performance. That's kind of the overview of where we started, where we're going.
Yeah, no, it's been a long, what's interesting is you just didn't get there overnight. It wasn't like you decided one day. I mean, we've done this kind of in phases over the last 4 years, and worked through those. I spent many nights with you testing stuff and fixing stuff, and I remember you've done a lot of things like, hey, we're going to switch this over this weekend. I need you available because we're going to mess with some stuff, and can you help me work with this? And I mean, I remember when IX web hosting, you'd had enough, right? I mean, you were really kind there. I remember you'd had enough, and you were like, we are moving, and okay, I'm good. Let's do that, right? One of those kinds of things. And so it's been it's been a journey to get there. So it's not just when I think about it. I mean, it's really been, especially in the last 2 years, just a little bit of work each time to get us there. And so a lot of people approach a problem like this, and they're like, well, I'm going to spend the weekend doing it. And it's probably a little bit longer than a weekend when you think about. I mean, you spent quite a few days just getting all the billing working right and all the all those pieces, but I think for you, once you get something going, you work it till it's in and it's right. And then you don't have to keep coming back to it, right? Yep. That's one of those things that I'm not that good that way. I'm kind of like, well, it works. Let's just go to bed. And you're willing to stay up late. Mike, you've come on to Maple Grove Partners from a customer experience standpoint, and you've only been around our community, I mean, less than a year, really, for the most part. So you can kind of come at it from a fresh standpoint. Any feedback is coming in as a new customer?
Yeah, well, because that's why I was interested in hearing what Christian had to say tonight, because really all my experience with Christian has been through just being a customer of him. Obviously, I host the omnpodcast.com page and the soon-to-be launched Suit and Scrubs podcast page, which has been out there for a few months now. But it was the entire experience started, I think, back in maybe November, December timeframe. I can't remember when it was, but I just went on the website and I just acted like pretty much I didn't even know Christian. I just went on and applied, and the whole customer experience was just flawless. And he even asked me, so we got on Skype afterwards and he was asking me about the experience and stuff like that. And it was shockingly easy to get all set up. And when he was talking about the customer service and being able to contact someone, I mean, the few times that I have had to contact him, it's been like, boom, he's right there, he's on it. He probably number one already knows about it, or number two is, has a solution ready within seconds. And so as a customer, it's been beyond just a relief, because I was on Azure at first, which was great, and I'm sure I did something wrong because I was having a bunch of problems with Azure and WordPress. But after coming over, it's been awesome. So I'm excited to hear all the back-end hard work you did to make it look so polished and neat in the past few months. Because I don't know if that's new or not, your entire customer portal and all of that, but it's been an easy experience and good to use. So.
Yeah, no, very good. Christian, all right, so let's talk about your current hardware configuration, because I think that's what a lot of folks are interested in. So give us kind of a rundown of what you got in the system.
Yeah, so we're actually running I would call it a semi-traditional server environment, right? So in a traditional enterprise, you would have, a rack mount, 36U rack, you'd be putting in blades. We try to do that, and let me tell you, the noise is such a problem in that type of setting that we didn't have the right soundproofing to make that work right. So we're actually using conventional towers, but what we kind of did was set up our hardware to replicate and fail over each other. So we have the physical hardware layer that I call it the management layer, because it's on one network, and it runs all the hypervisor virtualization layer for the web environment. So if you kind of think of it like two layers, you have your physical hardware, you have your virtualized operating systems, which are basically, they have direct access to the physical hardware, which is why it's pretty much like running on dedicated. But then when the hardware is spec'd the same way, you can back up, live migrate, fail over, and move around those VMs so that if at any one time one of your boxes in your architecture fails, it will automatically basically move over the running state of those virtual machines to another box, and will allow for your customers to be back up and running. So we built redundancy into the hardware profile itself, and each box has anywhere from 64 gigabytes to 128 gigabytes of memory, and that's so that we can properly slice and give a lot of, give generous overhead to our virtualization environment. And all of that's using kind of your traditional ECC checked memory. We're a big Intel shop for the hosting environment, so like 95% of the hardware is Intel based. Each system has at least 8 physical cores on it, so that we can, in our virtualization environment, control how many cores are being allocated to what web services. So at the hardware layer, kind of your run-of-the-mill, so to speak, in terms of these are more or less beefed up versions of your everyday computer.
Christian, can I ask you where you guys have kind of bought these unconventionally.
Yeah. So we decided that we wanted, again, part of this whole experiment and project has been how can we get the most performance for the least dollar. And so there's this really interesting phenomenon that takes place on eBay, which is as these big enterprise shops like phase out one generation to another, they do these huge blowout wholesale bulk, like we need to get them out of our warehouse, so we're going to sell it to you dirt cheap. So we watched for like months very closely at those games and just waited to the right time and just basically snapped up a whole lot of them. And basically both HP and Dell hardware on the server side, you can find incredible stuff that is really, 2 or 3 years dated in terms of technology, but because they beef up these servers so much to begin with when they're ordered fresh off the lot, the performance difference between something that's spanky new and something that's 2 to 3 years old, but was built enterprise grade, not that big a difference when you're looking at what are requirements for web hosting. And databases and network transport. So we really got a steal doing that. And like I said, when we found the right price point through those warehouse vendors, and there's certain vendors in eBay that they have their own store separate from eBay, but that's kind of where it's easiest to track the hardware. You can basically purchase a lot of really decent hardware at a third of the price for what you would get going retail and still run a pretty fantastic platform.
So you guys just kind of wait for those deals to happen, pick those things up year or two behind, maybe 3 behind, implement those in there, get them at a good price. What about the storage? How are you kind of managing that piece?
Yeah, so storage is really interesting. We basically have built different storage arrays to do different things. Probably the pride and joy storage array that we had first done was we built it was the hot setup at the time, but we had a Intel SAS controller that basically ran 8 2 terabyte drives in RAID 50. And that was kind of designed to be the metadata, information, business storage system, and the backup system. So basically any backup of virtual machine images or so forth would sit on that RAID, which is also failed over by default of it being RAID 50. And we could write to that thing close to 1 gigabyte. We could saturate the entire 1 gig network because the RAID was that responsive. So really high pipeline backup to that. And then basically for each of these boxes that we set up with the virtual machines, we usually set up a RAID 6 configuration where the OS drive is in there, and then you have a RAID 6 data partition that's putting the actual production virtual machine snapshots, and that's where the actual customer data ends up getting stored. And really, from a management perspective, it's incredibly efficient because you're backing up and save it. That's one of the big advantages to having a virtualized hosting architecture sitting on top of physical hardware, is that you're building a backup strategy based on backing up virtual machine hard drives, not backing up whole file systems or pieces of it and syncing and doing all that. A lot of that capability is built in. So good question on the forum. What is the OS and VM stored on? We're using a really hybrid solution. There is the Microsoft stack does some of our virtualization, but not all. And so things like Hyper-V would be familiar to you in that case. But all of our production web environment runs on CentOS, which is the free Linux version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which is kind of a big name. I think the 2 big Unix names for web hosting are going to be either Ubuntu or Red Hat, right? So CentOS, pretty big in the game, allows us to basically do minimal core installations of CentOS and only install what we need. So we basically we actually start with just the virtual machines are set up with the kernel, and it gives you a shell, and that's it. And then we built the custom package installation so that nothing is running on those virtual machines in excess except for the web environment itself, the web server, the database server, updates, time server. So that gives us a lot of control over what the CPU I/O is actually spending its time doing. Another good question was whether or not we're doing CentOS 6 or 7. When we launched the platform, we were all CentOS 6.6, and we have started, actually our email servers are now on CentOS 7, but we still have to keep our main production web environment stays in latest version of CentOS 6. That's really for kind of compatibility and ease of use, because upgrading those correctly and building a migration plan where stuff doesn't go down is kind of not, you got to evaluate when is the right cost performance time to do that upgrade. And really 6 is supported equally as well as 7 right now, and is going to be around for, it's kind of like Windows, Windows 8.1's out right now, but everyone's still using Windows 7 for the most part. It's kind of that deal. So we're very happy on that platform. But if we're adding something new to the environment, we'll by default go to the latest, right? So that's what happened when we added our email servers. We just said, hey, CentOS 7 has a lot of built-in improvements to the virtualization architecture we're using, so we're just going to take that functionality for granted and make sure that we're on the latest versions for our customers. And that's been really interesting. So we support that mixed environment.
Any SSD in the architecture at all in your setup? That's a question coming in from Ken.
Yeah, so we've actually been moving to solid state drives in phases for our system disks for the management layer. We found that the biggest performance gain we get is when our hypervisor is the operating system for the hypervisor itself is running on the operating system, and then but the actual customer hard drives, so to speak, are still sitting in those RAID environments. So those wouldn't change to SSD anytime soon. But SSDs for the system disk, incredibly helpful for getting Hyper-V to kind of move up and down, and some of the other solutions in the virtualization space to basically quickly be able to come online, offline, and do backups and metadata cataloging. That's where we saw a real improvement with that.
So when we think about the hardware infrastructure, I mean, when you think about physical amounts of equipment, I always hate to ask this question, but I mean, is it 5 to 10? Is it 10 to 20? I mean, what's it take to do what you're doing right now when we think about physical boxes?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I think about all the purchases we've made for various stuff, we're probably in the for the core infrastructure, somewhere between 8 and 15 for the core infrastructure. I would say for the total kind of built out thing and the research that we've done, it's probably somewhere between 15 and 20. And that, this doesn't kind of count things like how much does it pay for that fiber connection coming into the basement. So just looking at hardware and the kind of the pipeline infrastructure, I would say it's somewhere between 8 and 10 for the core stuff that keeps the business running and the customers happy. Which, if you think about, for the high performance value that our customers are getting, and for the all the things we discussed earlier, that's not a bad price point to be doing this offering at. And we basically built the infrastructure so that our baseline is somewhere between this 8 to 15 figure for the core, right? But if as our customer demand expands, we proportionally scale our hardware with that. So it's not like we're not prepared to have a massive influx of customers, because we've scaled the architecture so that it's plug and play, ready to go. You pop in a new box, it gets the image of all the stuff we're doing, and boom, new customers on there. So we basically scale both our bandwidth pipeline that we have coming in for fiber and our hardware racks, so that as we're seeing our customers start to saturate the existing resources, we add and provision new ones. We actually just have gone through this cycle a month ago. We just started putting in the next kind of piece of that. So we just did another order to keep things kind of running stable. And it looks like a question. So what line of CPUs are you using? Multiple CPU sockets. Yes. So most all of the boards that we run are dual socket, and they're all using Intel Xeons. Gosh, the exact model number escapes me, but typically 3.0 to 3.3 gigahertz clock speed. We give a pretty high cache for them, and that's going to give you 16 cores per. Sorry about that. 16 cores.
That darn thing.
Yeah, my knee. 16 cores per box, so that really gives you a lot of flexibility to control what types of virtual machines have access to what resources, and you can allocate certain cores to certain customer environments. So we kind of have this pooled compute resource, which is really nice because you get to fine tune some of that power and say, this is a really high powered site, it's going to need more cores, and kind of work off that model as well.
So with, obviously you've always had the tech skills. I mean, you started this at age 12 and you've liked doing that, security and stuff like that. Have you liked or disliked kind of getting into the whole business side of things? So going out there, finding customers, dealing with them, the accounting side, adding up all the extra electricity in your house that you're not now drawing, doing all of those sort of businessy stuff. Has that been a joy to you, or kind of like, I wish I could just focus on the tech and not do the whole business side?
Yeah, I don't know if joy is the right word. It's been an interesting learning experience. That's what we're trying to say. No, it's really, I really do love working with the technology and seeing where we can make the performance gains. The administrative side is certainly difficult. You got to be on top of your. We've had consulting contracts that are part of our company model, but outside of the hosting environment, where one of the big things we did when we moved over to offering the hosting was obviously with this automated ordering system. Now we have the capability to do automatic invoicing, to handle payment gateways, to do all this stuff. So that actually kind of helped automate and alleviate some of that stuff. Fortunate to have Gary, who does a lot of the taxation and administration on that side, so I really don't worry about that as much. I'm well aware of what's going on within the company from that standpoint, but it gives me more time to focus on the customer side and the technology side, which is really critical. But yeah, it's something that you have to learn and you have to get it right, otherwise it doesn't showcase the technology well. But at the same token, you got to make sure your technology stack is what customers want to pay for. And that's over time. The more automation and smart technology you build in to do that administrative stuff, the less time it costs you individually to be doing that. So that's kind of the direction we've consistently tried to move into.
Christian, you talked a little bit about your bandwidth in and out, and I don't think we've spent any time on it here talking about it. What, from a customer standpoint, there were some challenges with that, right? Of the way you host this, and now how you're doing it. Can you talk a little bit about your partnership with Verizon?
Sure. So when we were back in what we call the homebrew phase, we were doing something that most internet providers wouldn't support, which is most residential connections have port 80 and all these other things blocked. Ours didn't, and as long as the bandwidth wasn't being abused, they were all right with us doing some of this homebrew stuff. So eventually, when we realized that we were ready to go pro with this, we were ready to get static IPs dropped, we were ready to go pro, so to speak. We worked with the Verizon small business team, and we have great FiOS Verizon in the area, and so we basically started paying for that small business line, and it's completely separate. And keep in mind, there are multiple networks running in this environment, right? But they're completely isolated. So one of the big challenges was figuring out first, in an environment where the hardware is in the same physical space, what's the best way to physically and virtually isolate these networks so that stuff can't leak back and forth, so to speak. Once that was architected and figured out, it was actually really relatively easy to get the Verizon team to come in, add the new ONTs that were required, and then we can basically scale up our static IPs with them, our bandwidth as needed. So it's a really great customer relationship, actually. And its cost, it's a good cost for us because we're getting really great bandwidth to our customers, and Verizon comes in at a really great price point for that in our area. So it's honestly, if Verizon FiOS was not the provider in that area, we would not be able to offer the quality of the service that we are, because there's just very few other providers like that can do a good of job for as much money. I mean, if you look at the kind of cable equivalent business offerings from Time Warner or Comcast or Cox. I mean, they don't come close to what you could do on the business side. Residential side, yeah, maybe the bandwidth is similar, et cetera, and then you're getting nitpicky over the differences. On the business side, the difference is still really dramatic, and the pricing is still really dramatic. And Verizon is killing the competition in the areas that they're allowed to provide the service. There's actually some parts of the city where there are special contracts where Verizon was not allowed to compete because they basically bought out the city, so to speak, and that's why those big prices still exist, because they own those parts of the market. But the parts where Verizon goes, which fortunately we're one of them, I mean, just fantastic quality, fantastic customer service. In the 8-9 years we've had Verizon in different capacities for internet hosting, or not hosting, but just internet. I think they've gone out twice. Once on the residential, and once, believe it or not, 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, just recently, right?
Yeah, and I mean, but honestly, that's been it in the 8-9 years we've been with them. Their customer service is fast. I can get on and have a conversation with the business team. Is really different set of people from kind of some of the horror story residential calls that we've talked about in the past. So that's been a really great partnership all in all. And like I said, the platform would not be. It wouldn't be as feasible if Verizon wasn't in the mix. So we're fortunate to have that in our favor.
Yeah, no, it works out really well. There's been a couple questions about user experience, and I think this is where you're a little different. If I bought, and I've used Bluehost and HostGator, and I've used IX Web Hosting with you when we did that, and they give you kind of control over a cPanel, and you go in there and you gotta spin up, if you want to spin up WordPress or whatever, you got to kind of manage all of that. One of the things, and I know fairly customizable on your side, one of the things I've liked about it is I said, hey, Christian, I need another WordPress site. You spin it up and say, here's the URL, just log in and do what you need to do. Is that kind of been, because you're kind of focusing, at least with us and podcasters, on hosting media and hosting WordPress sites, is that kind of the typical user experience you're looking for? In other words, you'll get it spun up to where what they need and then just kind of turn that over to them? Or what are your thoughts on that user experience?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest shortcomings of the shared hosting environment is they just give you all this crap, and sometimes people just don't know what to do with it if they're new timers, right? So I like to basically set them up on the optimization pipeline where they're not going to have to spend the years of research I did really figuring out how to get to the sweet spot. So if someone says, I want to run a blog, I say, okay, what do you think of WordPress? And they say, yeah, I really like that platform. I said, great. Like you're saying, here's the username and password to your instance. When a customer gets that kind of feedback and you say, yeah, it's already optimized and ready to go, and you can learn more about it as you're working with the hosting environment, I find that customers are generally much more appreciative of that than sitting here and saying, yeah, here's the knowledge base, go read up on how to do it. I mean, it's a different perspective. My policy is more about, based on whether you're at our $10 a month package or our $30 a month package for the dedicated stuff. In both cases, I try and give the customization and flexibility where if you want to do something cool and creative, we're not going to stop you from doing it as long as it's not insanely abusive to our systems. And so we've done a lot of that where, some users are at different points in their ability to administer and run these servers, and based on that experience level, we kind of give them different levels of access to our infrastructure. So, if you're a new timer running on a web container, yeah, I'm going to hand you a login to WordPress and say, here it is. Here's how you get to your FTP. If you have questions, you want to learn how to do more, let's talk. If you're a senior systems administrator and have been doing this stuff for years and you want access to a dedicated box that you're paying for, I'm going to say, great. Here's the login of that box, have a nice day, and I'm not going to send you a WordPress login link because I know you know how to install it probably just as quick as I do. So it's kind of, I try and make that distinction, and I try to treat each customer based on the experience and interest that they have instead of making everything cookie cutter, which is why that's one of the things you can do when you're a small business. And you know what? I love doing it because I'm not doing this to get rich. I'm doing this because the enterprise architecture challenge in and of itself, and just the fact that I can host my own stuff without any strings attached or people to answer to, so to speak, great thing for me. To have customers and to build a community around that of people who want that type of tight niche environment, that's a big deal of what this is all about. And the fact that we're offering all the usual standard kind of enterprise features, so to speak, with that customer environment is a big selling point for us. From a first-time interaction piece, we have an automated ordering system, so getting set up and paying for your order and getting into the system is all automatic. Once we receive your order, then I kind of look at, okay, here's what he wanted and here's what I want to do. You're going to get a personal message basically, and we're going to kind of quickly walk through what your requirements are, if you need any setup assistance, that kind of stuff. And then, the support model is really trying to keep it human as much as possible instead of throwing wiki articles at people. Obviously, as demand expands and more people show up, you kind of either do one of two things: you hire more really qualified, talented people, or you figure out how to make some of that stuff even more automated. But we're not there yet. So I have a couple, so to speak, customer ramp-up plans for if that were to happen. But at this stage of the game, that's really kind of where we want to be with our customers.
And I don't think people really understand how unique that is to Maplegrove, because for two reasons. So I used to be, and still am for one of my websites, on Squarespace, which there's this whole trend now to make everything easy for the blogger, whoever it is, the photographer wanting to make a website, the drag and drop and all of that stuff. And while it is easy, it's so cookie cutter and you're so locked into their system, and it might work great. Whereas when I moved over to you, just like you were saying, that customer experience of, okay, I'm right in the middle, I would say, okay, I already had my WordPress up, I know how to run it, yeah, I know FTP, okay, let's get you over there. I mean, it was so customizable, almost to the experience level, to what I want. If I didn't want WordPress, I could do something completely different, like you said. That is something so unique that it's almost like your competitive advantage, where I don't think you can find that anywhere else, where you're getting someone who's dedicated to you, who's giving you the good service and helping you where you need, but also giving you the flexibility to choose whatever you want. That's really when I came over. That was almost why I was so surprised. I was like, okay, am I going to be put into WordPress right away? Am I going to be put into something else? And that flexibility and the fact that you can run all of that on your hardware and get the type of uptime and just efficiency and responsiveness, whereas Squarespace claims the only way you can do that is to have everyone using the same exact cookie cutter option. You can give everyone their own option and be just as efficient. That's where I'm just shocked. That's why your whole back end setup, I think, is intriguing to everyone.
Yeah, and some of the other things, a big thing for me is basically to be able to have tools on my end that make it really fast for me to, I have no idea what the customer is going to want when they come in, and we try and give that customized experience. So I got to be ready on the go with stuff. I think Jim was saying a couple days ago, we had to do a change on one of his customer sites, and he said, here's this blog article on how to do this change that I want. And so I said, okay, it's done. And he kind of was like, wow, that was actually really fast that you were so on point with that. But it's honestly because I have all the tools always open and ready to go, and I know exactly where I need to be, and I've given a lot of thought to potential different scenarios where people are going to ask for common stuff. One of the good questions I see out in the chat was about migration, right? So do you guys support migration? Yeah, exactly. Give me a database backup file and give me your FTP contents, and guess what? You can do it all yourself, right? So we give you basically a full PHP MyAdmin, so you can upload and restore your backups. You can upload and push your new FTP over, and so you can actually do the whole migration plan yourself. If you need some help, we're there to help you. So we kind of give that model where it's like, if you don't want to be bothered, we're fine to let you go and do your own thing. But if you want a little hand holding along the way, we try and accommodate that. So it's a nice flexible model.
On that business model sort of thing, one thing not tech related at all, but just kind of a question I had: why LLC compared to partnership, anything sort of else? Why did you choose to go with the LLC, or was there kind of no really thought about it?
So it's actually the subclassification of the LLC is a partnership, right? Because the company was started by my dad and I, and but the LLC gives you some nice flexibility in taxation and doing quarterly reporting for taxes. basically also it helps you separate out when you get into full-blown corporation taxes, it's a very different ballgame. And so from an administrative side, for small businesses, it really helps to go down that LLC route. I would say of the 50 states in which you can start an LLC, New York State probably isn't the most user-friendly for LLCs, but it's not the worst. It's somewhere in the middle. And like with that, the rate at which you pay taxes in New York is high. But that being said, the administration model for an LLC and kind of coming up with privacy agreements and making sure your taxes are done right, that was kind of the easiest model for us to get up and going very quickly. And because it is a partnership, one of the LLC classifications in New York State is a partnership. So that really made sense for us.
Perfect.
Christian, you were talking about that time just a minute ago where I had that problem, and yeah, I was working on a WordPress site for a customer of mine who gets hosted there on Maplegrove Partners, and so I was going through some of my own troubleshooting, and literally found this article, and this had been a problem it's been a bug with WordPress for 4 years, and found that problem, and there were 2 SQL scripts, and I was like, hey, can you run these? And I sent you the link, and you're like, okay. I'm like, well, tell me when you're done. He's like, I did. They're done. And I went in, and it fixed it. And I could not. It was just one of those. I've been working with you a long time, right? I mean, so I don't know why I'm continually surprised when these things work the way they do. But just to be able to grab those 2 scripts, throw them in, because it's like, don't you need to log in and say, oh, this is going to be a big hassle, and it's going to take a long time, and this is probably not going to work right. You're just like, done. And sure enough, it fixed it. So that was fun. And while I've got good access to you through work, I've never really caught you at a time you haven't been responsive. I do want to say, if you're interested in jumping on a plan like this, and by the way, if you're with GoDaddy, you absolutely should jump ship and make your way over to Maplegrove Partners. There is no reason you should stay on GoDaddy for any reason at any time. Right? I'm just going to come flat out and say that. So if you're listening to this and you got a site over there, get with Christian. He'll make it easy to migrate. But it's just one of those things where your service, it's just the 2 of you, but you guys give some great service just for the 2 of you. And this is a community thing, right, guys? This is what we do in community, and I think it's really cool. One of the advantages to it is you're learning about all this stuff in your University of Maryland program, and then you're bringing it back and applying it. And so we're getting like the best, most cutting edge security and the way it's set up. And those kinds of things. We're getting top, right? I mean, we're getting kind of cutting edge stuff.
Yeah, and one of the questions out there was, is all your admin security and spinning up from the back end, is that custom or is that pre-built? We don't use any of the kind of traditional cPanel, direct admin, kind of the popular stuff. It's all stuff I've built for the most part. So I have a lot of my own management scripts. I've built a lot of my own dashboards. And so, the customer has unmanaged access to the level or extent that they need, but we don't. I mean, if someone really, really wanted a panel, fine. The reason why we are panel free is because it degrades performance, and without getting into the argument about why it does, we really try and hyper tune those environments, and that takes what I call Christian Johnson tender love and care, not cPanel hope you get it right care. So that's some of that.
We need to shout, we're panel free.
We are panel. We have been freed from the panels taking over planet Earth.
And to be honest with you, I don't have a need as a podcaster. I don't have a need for a panel. Just let me into WordPress, right? That's what I need. Give me an FTP. I use FileZilla for that. Just give me access to FTP so I can upload my files. A lot of our podcasters, we talk about this in the podcasting community all the time, is, don't host at the same place that don't host your media at the same place you're hosting your website, because a lot of these guys buy this $3 a month, unlimited whatever. You've seen those plans, right? Unlimited bandwidth, unlimited storage, and then as soon as you get popular, they say, well, you've really violated. Christian, you really have a different model in this. And we went through my stats when we were first starting thinking of doing this. Like, all right, let's think about on an average day or an average week or an average month, can you support this financially? And you kind of used Home Gadget Geeks, used the Average Guy Network as kind of in your own, cyber frontiers to kind of measure that. And we do recommend in this case that we host both files, both your website and your hosting. We want to do both, so you don't have to go to different places. So for $10, you get both hosting, and you get media hosting.
Yeah, and I think we both.
You might need to make that a smidge bigger if you can.
Okay, yeah, but I think wow, I forgot what I was gonna say.
I was talking about hosting, file hosting, same location.
Yeah, we did the draw out of, if you start at the $10 a month plan for podcasting, how many years of audio can you store? And I think we came out around 5 years for the average, 1 hour to 1.5 hour podcast length, produce an MP3. How many of those MP3s are you going to be able to store on the default plan? And we came out to about 5 years worth. I wanted to screen share a little bit to talk about how some of the security stuff is that I do. And so what you're actually looking right now is a real-time view of some of the metrics that I have about my system. So this is one of several dashboards that I monitor about what's going on in the network. We keep a real-time, so a couple things that are really important, and this is one place, again, where Maplegrove is very, very different from your typical provider. Providers like Verpus, where they give you the VPS, they will refuse to block any IPs that come in and out of their network, because their model is basically, we serve all traffic inbound and outbound, and it's on you to filter and block IPs as needed. We say no, that's complete rubbish. We know there are bad IPs that are always going to be bad IPs. So we do a lot of things to basically keep your website from getting hit. Number one, we get subscription lists for blacklist IPs, and basically these are lists for known cybercrime networks, most active attacking IPs on the internet, email spam relay servers, etc., etc. All those lists get blocked at our edge, meaning it can never even enter our network, yet alone the web hosting environment. So right there, we take a big portion of the crap out on the internet and keep it from hitting your sites. That's going to help you have less spam in your WordPress queue. It's going to help your site from being slow because you're getting a lot of traffic that's not related or getting a DDoS. And then, we do a lot of this real-time monitoring. So we have an intrusion detection system that will pop us alerts in real time as stuff is going on in our environment. For the stuff that isn't known bad malicious actors, it's going to monitor and watch that. And then we also have all of our, so the typical website user, and this is mind-blowing to me, right? Typical website user, you have in your FTP directory an access.log and an error.log, and that's Apache basically logging everything that's going on in your website, right? How many times have you actually opened up that access.log and seen what the requests are, seen what the IPs are, looked for the trends? If you have a large running website where that log file is getting large, guess what? You're going to try and open that up in FTP. It's going to be 8 gigs large, and your notepad or whatever remediary tool you're using to look at that is going to crash. You're not even going to be able to read the file. We stream all of our logs. We don't even store them as log files. We stream all of our log data into a Elasticsearch database that is basically a NoSQL solution that indexes all of the data, And then in the dashboard that you're looking on this screen, in real time, it's updating metrics for me. So the frequent IPs that are showing up in the hosting environment, I have a couple things that make sense to me that won't make sense to you. But you can see some of the metrics, right? 404 error alerts. I monitor 404s because that can be either indicative of a code configuration issue or someone is trying to hit pages that they're rotating through URLs. I look at 408s because that's indicative of performance. If 408s are very high, it usually means that the web server might be having problems serving traffic. Login attempts, I monitor for any WordPress environment or application that you're running where I know where the login endpoint is. I monitor all the IPs that are trying to hit your login server, so that if I see that there's something weird, I'm just going to block it for you. And I know which ones are the right IPs because the audit trail is there. So I do some of that in the back behind the scenes. You never even have to worry about it. With all of this data, you say, okay, this is cool. I'm getting a nice little overview. That's cute. how do I know what made this data? Well, in one click of the button, I can basically show you the record from what used to be a log data. So if I click this, it's going to replay the search from my index database, and basically, boom, right away I see the timestamp that it was logged, the overall message, and then I have these fields, right? So I can get the IP address, I can get the referral, the request that it was making, I can get the browser type, the user agent that it was using, I can get all these different fields, right? And then I can see, oh, here's the averageguy.tv, here is the login endpoint, here is the IP that tried to get on. They were using a Mozilla Chrome version 30 browser to make that attempt. I can see the size of the packet request coming in, and I can then go and say, that's interesting. So this IP is making a login from the average guy. I wonder why. So then I want to see a bigger picture of what this IP has been doing on my network. So I say, in the last day, where have I seen this IP? I know about this IP. Hit search, and boom, instant search result. I can see all the activity that this IP has ever had on my network, and that's something that you really don't get in your typical logging solutions. Your typical system administrators are going to look for more systemic large network attacks. They're not going to necessarily worry about the admin or security of your local site. And so this is the type of stuff that my dashboard has the capability of doing. If you take a look at my streaming sources, so to speak, we have about 15 million events that have been generated in the last week or two. That's how many millions of events that our platform generates that I can monitor and be aware of in real time and know, boom, something's right, something's wrong. I've been able to catch attacks pretty much as they're starting to happen and shut them down before they can even basically execute what they want to. And these are the types of things that keep performance up, keep you from getting hacked. And that's why, you know, we really pride ourselves in making sure that we're providing you the best security that we can for what you want to do. Another example, look at your FTP environment, right? Your hosting provider is giving you a username and password for your FTP, and it's probably going over the plain text FTP protocol. It's probably not even FTPS, which is the SSL version of that. We don't allow any password-based authentication, period. If you want to log into our network, you will use an RSA secure encryption key that was randomly generated by myself and signed and sent to you via a secure email message. And unless someone else manages to copy the private key off your machine by having physical access to your box, you're going to have a very difficult time trying to crack a key that has a 2048 key length. So that's something that a traditional large-scale hosting environment will never be able to do or support because, you know, that's not industry standard. But for us, we take that seriously. You want to keep people out of your FTP. You want to keep your file secure. That's how you do it. With our database environment, one of the biggest things we've seen with WordPress especially is that the plugins for WordPress are incredibly buggy. And with a lot of these new, cool, high-tech, responsive sliders and all this other stuff, they've had introduced some really, really severe cross-site scripting and database SQL injection attacks. And some of the plugins that are used in virtually all WordPress installations that I am aware of have been compromised in the last 6 months and have had these vulnerabilities. And what that basically lets you do is if you're a malicious actor, you can very quickly download someone's WordPress configuration file and get their database username and password. Well, that's great. Even in the event that they were able to do that and their plugin was leaked, because of the way our architecture is signed up, they're never going to be able to touch your database because the database is sitting behind the network, right? So if you're IX web hosting, right, it's a public IP address that you log into that database. In this case, no. Database is behind a layer. They can't actually even try and make a login attempt to that publicly. Number two, no password authentication based for the FTP server. So they're not going to be able to get to the other files in your system unless they've come in through another way. And three, all of our databases have randomly encrypted and generated passwords. So they're going to basically get a long string of crap unless you went in and manually changed it. And it's not going to mean anything else to anywhere else in our network. It's solely for that database. And even if they were to compromise that database in your or that password in your WordPress configuration file, they would never be able to take the data directly because it's behind the network without launching some different type of attack. So we really have different levels of isolation in our network that allows us to still provide the customization and the user experience and make things mostly familiar and not be too painful to set up, but also provides you a lot more security than what your average shared hosting provider is going to give you.
No, that's actually very cool, Christian. You pinged me the other day. You're like, hey, where are you logging in from? You know, and I was like, well, I'm here. You know, have you done this from here? No. Well, you know, that's kind of a nice proactive approach to making sure, you know, that I'm not getting compromised, that things aren't going the way. And you know, there's a lot of people out there doing that. And so it opened my eyes to, you know, I used a WordPress plugin to kind of monitor the login attacks that were coming in. And man, one of the sites was just getting hammered. And so we did some things to fix that and lock that down. But I had no idea you leave that out there, and it just leaves it open for attack for sure.
Yeah, and actually one of the most interesting ones that I was monitoring for a long time, in this case you can see it still has a little bit of life. This widget here, which isn't really showing much right now, it says BitTorrent botnet attempts. There's been this very strange BitTorrent-like botnet that has been on the internet and hitting all sites. I mean, just all sites with these very strange, bogus requests. And it's become this huge botnet network. And so this dashboard used to be lit up because that botnet had somehow leached onto the IP and just started trying everything. And we basically systemically took out their distributed capability to attack our network. And then we also published security alerts. So I actually published all the IPs that are associated with that black network that launches that type of attack. And obviously, because it's distributed, they've corrupted and taken over machines all throughout the world. But you know, this graph right now that you're looking at, you can see the bar for one or two messages in the time period, right? That was like 200 before when the attack first started, right? So the fact that only one or two requests that are getting through in that distributed attack, really fantastic use case of how we use this dashboard to basically call and prune our IP addresses and keep stuff out. Some people want to block, you know, whole country codes, right? So they think, you know, China's all bad, Russia's all bad, I don't want them on my site, I'm targeting US customers. Our policy is basically we believe that our users should have the most visibility and access to the largest portion of valid users. So if you're going to have valid users in those countries, fine, we're going to let them connect, and we're only going to take action if we have physical security precedents to do so.
Very cool. Let's take some questions from chat. We got to kind of, believe it or not, we've been going an hour. So let's get a couple questions from chat. Randy Cantrell had asked about FTP migration. So he's a podcaster, and like me, we had my MP3 files stored someplace else. If a podcaster was going to come over, Christian, what's the best way to handle that of moving their MP3? In my case, I didn't want to lose my file structure, right? Because I had hundreds of posts to a certain file structure, right? And I didn't want to have to go into WordPress and change all those.
Right.
How do you handle that?
So basically,
flip back over to your.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, you're fine.
So one of the great things about migrations that you're going to have access directly to your FTP in our environment, meaning you can reset up and create the directory structure however you want. So if you want to replicate exactly the directory structure you have in your current or previous hosting environment, you're going to be able to do that so that you can basically have the same exact URL points, file location, etc. If that changes or you want to change it going forward in this new site, we can help you, or plugins can help you in WordPress or otherwise set up smart redirections and aliasing so that your old URL scheme automatically rewrites to whatever the new path is you want to set up. So there's multiple ways to go about that, but more or less when we start migrating customers, we basically just want to clone their existing environment, and then if they want to make those changes on their own, they can go ahead and do that. But basically, it's directly sucking down one full copy of your FTP from your current hosting environment, download all that to your computer, and then just push it right back up to our FTP. And then once you put that database backup image, and we basically go into the database config file and hook it up to the new database, you're up and running with basically the same site once you've moved over your DNS to point to our systems.
Yeah, one of the things I've liked about working with you, Christian, is it's not a email thing. You prefer to just jump on Skype and like, let's hammer this out now. Like, let's do this in real time, get it done. Mike, I'm sure he worked with you maybe, and did you get that kind of service too?
Oh, yes. Everything on Skype. It has been ever since then. I got the same message you did, a few days ago. Like, hey, did you log in from here? And just being proactive about everything. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So much. It goes so much faster. In fact, there's some nights. Now, Christian works with me too at work, so there's some nights we get on Skype and we talk, and then we forget, like, we're still on, we're still working, and we're like, I gotta go. All right, see ya. And like, there's been minutes with no conversation, but it's so convenient just to work that way, to have that instantaneous. And weekends of conversion, I've spent hours at times getting files moved. Okay, I need you to move these files. Let's get this done, and then call me back. Boom. Get that stuff done, ping them back. Okay, it's all here. Let's do this, and let's get this done. And you'll hear Christian typing madly away on his end, getting stuff done. But it's really the right way to do it, I think, from that standpoint of get those things done. So Randy, Randy says, hey, he gets WordPress, he gets FTP, the PHP, and the SQL backend, not so much, and that's okay. I don't mess with it either. Christian does that for me. That's why I sent him the SQL query. Log in. Now on Azure, I've got a site on Azure, and I control everything there. I do the SQL pieces if I need to on Azure. That's just the way that's set up because it's completely automated. But in this case, I'd rather have Christian do all that stuff for me. And so from time to time, I ping him. It's not a lot. I just ping him every once in a while, like we had that problem. Hey, run the script for me to fix this problem I'm having. Boom, it's done. So pretty cool way of doing service there. Rennie had asked the all-important question, why Maplegrove Partners?
It is the name of a street in my hometown that the maple tree is very, especially in Canada, right? It's maple trees, so just kind of maple street, a lot of maple trees, street name, and then partners because it's a partnership. Yeah. And so boom.
I knew there's not that big of a story to it. It's just a street name.
Yeah. That's what you get.
Let's see what else was in there in the chat room that somebody had seen that the time zone on your reports was set to 3 in the morning. We assume that's all UTC.
Yeah, that's just standard UTC time. I convert in my head.
And then Mike asked about what about IP denying to block specific networks, and you talked a little bit about that, about blocking countries. Yeah. What about specific networks?
So actually all of our edge in production is on pfSense, and we've talked about pfSense in the home. It's fantastic in the enterprise too, let me tell you. So all of our public-facing IPs get dropped into NICs, and we have basically blocks of 4-port NICs, so you kind of have these monster machines with maybe 10 gigabit NICs hanging around in them, and each of those get sucked into a pfSense instance, and we basically automatically do all of our firewalling and IP block rules there. So I can block any subnet I want straight from the edge device and just take it off the whole network so that it never even hits the web environment. I can also do it from the web environment so that the traffic can get into the network, and then the web server will make a determination. But it's generally both safest and best for performance if you just block it at the edge. And that also allows us to do the automatic subscription lists, where we automatically update what subnets and networks are and aren't allowed to connect to the platform.
Yeah, and I like that because I don't have to monkey around with my WordPress plugin and block that stuff. I know you guys are going to do it. I was doing that. Mike talked about WordFence, which is one of those WordPress plugins for security. I use WP Security. I think it's all-in-one WP Security if you go to your plugin page. That's the one I've been using over the last couple months and have really liked it. And they've got abilities to go in there and block it. Mike mentioned on WordFence, and I tried that one too. You can set it up if they try to access it like with a username that doesn't exist, they automatically get added to the block, which is kind of cool. Then I started doing that. I'm like, wait, Christian's probably doing that for me. So I just kind of quit. I was like, I don't need to block these things. If he sees it's it's getting blocked on the edge, and I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And that's not to say that every spammer is gonna, not hit your site, because they always change IPs and change their stuff and get in. But it's definitely going to be significantly less of the floodgate of what you're going to get in a fully public environment.
Yeah, Ken is asking for some security tips. Maybe we'll cover this in the post show.
Yep.
A little WordPress security tips. So if you're staying around, if you're listening to the recorded version of this, of course you only get the post show in most cases. Depends how good we may add the post show on in this case, but you only get the post show if you come out for the live show. So come out, join us Thursday nights, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. You get the interaction. We got a great chat room tonight. We'd love to have you come out as well. Mike, any other questions on your end, kind of before we wrap this thing up?
So I asked the hard question, but what's the best part about running your own hosting, running your own website, running your own company, interacting with customers? Just your favorite part of your day-to-day activity in the overall business aspect. What is it?
Freedom to do what you want, really. You know what's best, and there's little bureaucratic structure to stop you from doing what you know is best. And,
no red tape, gotta love it.
And that lets you make mistakes and make great decisions all at the same time, and have a good learning experience, and getting a chance to interact with people and make smart solutions work for folks. That's what the fun of it is.
Yeah, I dig it.
That's what you do.
You know what, Mike, you and I do this because we love it, and I love having Christian on the other end, because I know that I can just call him and be like, hey, can you? And I think, Christian, with most of your customers, right, if not all, it's probably that open, right? With you just kind of, hey, tell me if you need something, just tell me.
Yep.
So it's kind of cool to have that available. You know what? That's not for everybody, to be honest, but it might be for you. And so if you like that kind of environment, you're thinking of switching. Christian's got a $10 plan and a $30 plan. Those are all available if you want to check them out at Maplegrove Partners, maplegrovepartners, all one word, .com. And he's got his plans outlined there. You can give them a try, get it out there, get it going. And, man, once you're on, you're kind of hooked. It's a whole different way of kind of doing this, because, like Christian said, he'll let you go as hard as you want it to be. He'll just give you root access. There you go. Here's your container. Have fun. If that's what you want, he'll make it that way. If you're like me and you're like, really, I just want to be a content creator, I want access to WordPress, I want to upload my files, he'll make it that way for you as well. And I think because this thing was born a little bit on podcasting, he's pretty good at knowing what podcasters need. So I think it's one of those things where if you're a podcaster and you're like, I don't know, this hosting mumbo jumbo stuff, Christian's got room for a couple more podcasters on there. And we run some podcasts out at theaverageguy.tv. It's, I don't want to say it's a huge network, but we push some files every single day off of his network, and it does great. I've never heard anybody complain, hey, I can't get to your file. It's always there. Anytime they can, it's usually my fault because I forgot to FTP it up to the site in that case. And so with that, we'll say, Christian, thanks for coming out. If you haven't watched Christian on Cyber Frontiers yet, that's the other podcast available on the network here. Cyber Frontiers, head over to theaverageguy.tv. Just look for the orange section. That's the Cyber Frontiers piece. And they've got a great cybersecurity, big data podcast going on. Most of it goes over my head, but it may be great for you. And we're getting a good audience around that as well. So join us out at theaverageguy.tv for that. A couple reminders, if you've been purchasing from Amazon, and many of you have been, that's dynamite, by the way. Thank you for what you're doing there. A reminder, you can use our Amazon link at work too. If you're at work and you're buying from Amazon and you go to the Amazon affiliate link, it works. It still works, even though you're buying for work and it's not personal. Still works for us. We had a couple of those happen this month where I saw 40 of this and 30 of that get purchased, and I know not everybody needs 40 cables. It's probably going to be for an enterprise. That works as well. Head out to theaverageguy.tv/Amazon or Amazon CA if you're in Canada. Just go to John Zadler. In fact, we need to get Zadler back. I say that every podcast, but got to get Zadler. I'm going to hit him tonight, and we're going to get Zadler back on the schedule. John's always entertaining to come on. And if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, I'm actually behind. Oh, man. This newsletter may not get done. I'm just going to say it. It might be a July newsletter. I have been just get it done. But that just shows you I don't spam you when you sign up for the newsletter. So head out to theaverageguy.tv/newsletter. You can read the past ones. I'm going to try and get to the other one. I got a special story for you, so I've really been working on it, and so it might be just a little late. I apologize for that. We are out on Saturday mornings at Ask the Podcast Coach. If you're a podcaster or thinking about podcasting, Dave Jackson and myself head out there, askthepodcastcoach.com, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. And then I mentioned earlier that we have the Home Server Show meetup coming up here. September 12th is the day. I didn't mention that date at the beginning of the show. September 12th, we'll put the link to it. Mike and I are heading out. We're going to old school road trip.
Love it.
This could be like Hangover. I'm not gonna lie.
What happens at the thing stays there, you know.
What happens in Indianapolis stays in Indianapolis. So, no, we're gonna have a good time. If you've never been to the meetup, they're always worth coming to at least once. And so, Indianapolis, September 12th, $25. You just got to get yourself there. It's going to be a good time. And we're working. Did you see Yoda had the backpack server components?
I like that. Yeah, it's all set up. I just got to do it now. No excuse.
The backpack home server. Just put it on your back.
Yeah.
Make sure you have a long enough power cord and Ethernet cable, and you're in business.
I think I'm get solar panels. I'm going to have a hat of solar panels.
Solar panels are you need foot generators.
That's probably true. Inside, yeah.
Yeah, as you're walking around to keep that thing going. But I like the solar panel idea. That's not bad. Future topic. Speaking of solar panels, I've Dog the Bounty Hunter. Well, I've turned into Dog the Mole Hunter, and we have got moles in our yard like no tomorrow. And I was out buying stuff to kill them with. They now make this solar-activated little device you put in the ground, and then it vibrates, and it's supposed to make the moles go away. Haven't tried it yet, but talk about lawn tech.
There we go.
Those things. If you have tried one of those devices, I'd love to know if it actually worked, because I got moles. I got a whole colony of moles in my yard. They've been propagating out in this one section of my house. I didn't see them. Man, they're everywhere. So if you've got some good tips on moles, send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv. The better the tech involved in it, that would be awesome. Maybe I could send a robot. I need to send
a dog.
Robots. Dog or a fox.
Fox
would be great. Go ahead, Christian.
No, finish.
Oh, I was going to say, fox would be awesome. So if you got a pet fox that I could borrow for a week or so.
I know someone who does, actually. So
Really?
Yeah. Down in my wife's hometown, they post about it on Facebook all the time.
About the fox.
Yep.
It'd be sweet to have one come up and dig those things out of the lawn. Well, right now they're in a spot. They're not killing my lawn yet, but man, I have done everything I know. They keep coming back with a vengeance, so we'll have to figure that out.
Jim, maybe you could rent one of your interns to do it.
Get Colin out there. Hey, Colin.
Yeah.
Today your task is to dig out the moles, and not on my face, but in your yard, in my yard.
So we're running over, but I'm gonna do it because this is a gadget show. A couple weeks ago in the community, Jim posted about a super deal for a refurb Yoga 2 tablet for $200, and this thing is kick ass. I feel like this is a Surface on a budget. It's a 1920 by 1200 resolution IPS panel running Windows 8.1. Super crisp, super readable, snappy, 10-point touch display. It comes with the kick-out kickstand. Snap it right into the keyboard. I mean, it just is such a treat for $200. Gets 24 hours of battery life, atom powered. I got all my apps on it. Skype looks crystal clear. I do Facebook. I mean, it is just a perfect little go-to device for watching videos, internet, school. 24 hours of battery life, 1920 by 1200 IPS resolution. Where the hell are you going to find that for $200?
Yeah, it's a pretty good deal. It's gone now. But
deal of the year.
I know. You only get that deal if you join us on the Facebook page, and I think I got that deal from Kevin Schoonover because he's the master of deals. Right?
He really is. He's always posting the best.
So awesome. But if you want to know what's going on, you got to join our Facebook page. Head out to theaverageguy.tv/Facebook. That'll take you right to the group. Ask for permission. I'll let you in. They're there. That's where we post our deals. So if you want to stay on top of this kind of stuff, head out there. It's a great way to do it. If you're not on Facebook, sorry. That's just where I post them. And maybe I'll try Twitter. If you're not on Facebook but you're on Twitter, let me know. And maybe I'll start posting those on Twitter as well. But with that, we'll say watch us every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern. Mike and I have some dynamite stuff coming up ahead here. We were just going through the list of things coming up, and so we've got some stuff ahead. If you haven't gone over and checked out Mike's podcast, We pimped Christians here a second ago. Mike does open mic night, omnpodcast.com. And lots of stuff covering right now in the Apple world. I mean, let's see. What do they have? They have a watch.
And that's about it, right? That's the only thing.
Watch.
Yeah.
And did they come out with
really crappy music
watch?
service? So.
Yeah, you were like dogging the music service, man.
Yeah. Apparently, if you want to get your, so it's an Apple fan podcast, obviously, or not Apple fan.
You want to be an Apple fan.
If you want to get your listeners going and get more engagement, I've gotten more emails in the past day than I've ever gotten, which isn't still, it's just awesome. I got them all riled up, all confused. My mom even called me. He's like, "What are you doing?"
But I want to use the music service, and you said no.
That was like exactly how the conversation went.
That's so funny. Well, Mike, one of the things I like about our network and what we do is if it's junk, we call it junk. If it's good, we call it good. And even on your Apple focus, you're a fanboy, like all the way. But there are times you're like, you don't want to do this. And so if you want to listen to a fair Apple-based podcast, I think Mike Weger is the way to do it. What's your co-host's name?
Collin Ball. And he's new, and he's never podcasted before, but I'm really liking bringing him in. He's starting to pick up kind of the nuances of it, and he's got a lot of good stuff to say. So I've been liking having him on. He's been on for about 3 episodes, so it's going well.
Yeah, OMN podcast, and he's going to work on his logo to get that to look more like Apple. We've been talking about that for a while now. So, but great podcast. I try to catch them live Tuesday nights, 7 p.m. Central, 8 Eastern. And that's one of those on Tuesday that I try and catch, and then I always check in with Mike Howard when he's done. He's also JPEG to Raw. He's also Tuesday nights. I think he starts, might be around the same time. It's tough to catch both of them, but JPEG to Raw. He's always out in our community as well. You can find me on homeservershow.com, surfacegeeks.net from time to time, and of course everything we do at Gallup at coaching.gallup.com. We're getting back on track at Gallup too as well, and so a lot of podcasting stuff going on. But we are live right here every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out at theaverageguy.tv live. And with that, we'll say good night, everybody.